Hello and welcome to this week's video on My Hero Academia. This week I'm reviewing the episode From Aizawa, and we kick off this review as we always do with these reviews by talking about the positives and the headline positives, all the big things I'll be discussing over the course of this review. I loved the dark reveals, I liked the time spent in the thought space realm, and I enjoyed the team up towards the end of the episode. This is another one of those weeks where something happens in the programme that I've always wondered about, and I'm right now really hoping that I've mentioned that idea at some point in a previous video, otherwise I can't prove that I called it, because I genuinely did. And it wasn't spoilt for me. I just don't think I've actually expressed that idea out into the universe. You know, just musings in the back of my head, even recently. You know, and this week we get confirmation that that thing that I was thinking about actually did happen, which, okay, that's... I don't know how to feel about that, but again, I suppose this is another case of, Chris, if you have an idea or a prediction for something, for God's sake, let it out into the universe. That way you look smarter than you really are. Because this week, we learned that All For One is behind it all along! That Tomura's quirk really isn't his quirk, and that All For One set up all the stuff that would have the biggest emotional impacts on Tomura to make him a villain. He took Tomura's original quirk and gave him a weaker version of overhauls, which I wasn't expecting. Like, I kind of predict, oh yeah, maybe his quirk isn't really his quirk, maybe it's something that was given to him by One For All at some point or another in the past, but... or All For One or whatever at some point in his past, but... now it's a more specifically one of overhauls, which I suppose adds even more credence to the idea that he was supposed to be All For One's real successor. I mean, just giving him that quirk was one thing. I mean, it's just... like, I thought that I thought that he was the one that gave him that quirk, because I'm sure that he was aware of Tomura even before everything we knew in this episode, because it wouldn't have been that hard for him to have tracked down Nanasumura's family and then go from there, try and twist things and manipulate things as he wanted to. And I always predicted that the reason why Tomura's quirk manifested at that exact moment is because All For One did it. Like, he had some kind of remote quirk activation thing and he used it in that specific instance so that it would have the biggest emotional impact. But no, he just spent all that time setting up the pieces for Tomura to knock down when the time was right. He manipulated his father for years to break him down and resent heroes more than he did. He convinced Tomura's father to have an extra son so that All For One would have someone to manipulate. He took Tomura's real quirk to make things harder on him and his family, make it harder for him to fit in with everyone and to live up to being in a world full of superheroes and not having a superpower. And he gave Tomura fake friends to play with. He just told those kids, oh yeah, you should totally play with that guy. You should play that kid, even though they really didn't seem to care otherwise. Which no doubt made him doubt himself even more. Like, I'll be honest, I've never believed that All For One was this super genius that he in the story has ever made him out to be. But he really does know how to play the long game, and that's ultimately what he's doing here. I will be blunt, I've never been a big fan of the I am the architect of your misery scenes that we get in movies on TV programs, especially bearing in mind that it's a trope that was really done to death in the late 2000s into the mid-2010s, where almost every bloody movie would have a scene like that. It'd be a scene where one of our villains, if not the main villain, is like in a glass box, and they're talking about how they did all these nasty things in the background to manipulate and to break down not just our hero but wider society. And yeah, we've all seen those scenes. They've just been a thing now for the better part of almost 20 years. Fact really have faded off because it's become just so intolerable, just so repetitive. But hey ho, here we are with a scene like that, and I will at least say that I'm willing to believe that All For One is like that, because at least it seems more believable with him, because there have been many things over the course of this series which haven't gone his way. So it isn't totally beyond the realms of possibility that he really is telling the truth. Well, we know he's telling the truth because we're seeing the memories. But like I say, it's a lot more believable that he is actually doing this. He is the architect of all this misery because of all the times it hasn't quite worked out as he planned it to. Because the vast majority of all of this, particularly the stuff that he did before Tomura was born, was just him talking, just moving the pieces around the board slightly and subtly. And, as I say, throughout this series, we've had event after event where Tomura and his band of chuckleheads has bollocked something up, and then you'd have All For One in the background reflecting upon it and thinking, well, it didn't go exactly to plan, but it's pretty much how I wanted it to go. I mean, that's not literally what he says, but there's been plenty of times where, yeah, he's got something resembling the result that he wanted to, but maybe not exactly how he wanted it to go, but hey, it's close enough. And, had everything had worked out for him over the years, then I'd be less willing to accept him being the architect of misery here, but, like I say, it's at least been done in a way which feels a lot more, well, real. Not everything has gone to plan for him, a lot of things haven't gone to plan for him, but he's just being very, very good at setting a lot of this stuff up well ahead of time. The first act of this episode is spent with Tomura and Midoriya in the big thought space realm thing. And I expected that we would see a little bit more with Nana Shimura. I really think that is something we should have seen a little bit more on. But I think that at the very least, the fact that she will never know the full extent of the origin of her son's hatred for her and heroes, and the fact that a lot of it is down to All For One, is something that's the kind of miserable I do like. It's kind of like Kyle Reese in Terminator, or Adric in Doctor Who. They'll never know that they're right, they'll never know the full story because they're just not going to be able to see it. Maybe there's an aspect of Nana Shimura who that still exists, maybe these other vestiges are still going to be knocking about and coming back at some point, but at least in the here and now, she only knows part of the story and is blaming herself for what happened. But we'll see exactly how all these things go. I will admit that I would have liked the stuff in the thought space realm to have been done in a more of an abstract way, at least in the climax. Though I will admit that, reflecting on it a little bit more, I do think this is the better abstract way they could have done it, because we do get a sense of the abstracts and that more of a creative direction with this, because this is Midoriya getting Tomura to focus on him and only him, so the rest of this world, the rest of this space, the rest of this moment isn't there. It's just them in a void. To ignore the pain of reliving the past and just reach down into truly who Tomura is, to reach down to the Tenko Shimura who still lives within him. And we also get that in the sense of Tomura's form decaying. They've really gone out of their way over the past few years to underline the idea that Tomura and Tenko are like two different personalities, almost to the point where they're two different people. And I get that for a show like this, but as I've mentioned in the past, it feels a little bit too much like this is the moment where Walter White became Heisenberg thing to me. Like, it's trying to distance all these things being the actions of a different entity rather than this all ultimately being the actions, rightly or wrongly, of Tenko Shimura. And this idea of distancing these things out doesn't quite work, especially when they've gone to all these lengths, particularly in this episode, to say just how much of an influence All For One has had on him. But I think that it's less of a literal representation of one being a different personality to the other, but more so that they represent two different things of the same person. That Tenko represents the scared, innocent child within him. He is the inner child in need of healing and saving. And Tomura here is decaying, not because that personality is dying, but more so that the pain that they represent is fading away in this instance. He is never going to stop being Tomura, but he will stop being a destructive force. That Tomura is just an extension of Tenko. He's just a different aspect of him. They're not two separate entities. They're not two separate things. And that had this healing process properly had its time to come together, yes, he would still be Tomura, but he'd be Tomura in a position where he can heal. Like, had that decay thing had gone to its climax, I don't think Midoriya would have been stood there with just a bunch of ash and soot over him because the rest of him is just decayed with it. or maybe it would have done, I don't really know, but you get the idea. It's more of an abstraction thing of trying to to show the destruction of this pain and this anger and this fear that's been within him for all this time. It's rotting away, and that maybe after that you get back to the person that he should have been. I think that on the one hand, the home space that we saw maybe needed to be a little bit more abstract, but at the same time I understand why it wasn't. This is showing what is happening here in the true cold light of day. This is a simple domestic scene. We are seeing a child being abused in the way that they are, something that sadly happens across the world. It regrettably isn't something that's special or unique, and it is showing the trauma that made Tenko become Tomura, this destructive force, in a way that is, no pun intended, not pulling any punches. It is showing the origins of a cycle of abuse and how that then can spread out and reach out in the world that it takes place in. It is odd that they have the shadow version of Tenko vanish so quickly, but then that does go back to the idea of the person reaching out to him. Like, we even have it in the episode, what if someone reached out to save him when he was a lost child? Now, granted, given what we know of O-Form being behind all of this, I don't think that person would have had much of a chance to save him, but maybe that's a video for a different time. But like I say, this is a process of trying to show the attempt of healing Tomura to get him back to Tenko, to heal and decay the pain and the fear, rather than the literal, almost anime thing of they're killing that personality, or they're killing that entity, or they're killing that spirit. It's about pulling away and tearing away and decaying away that evil more so than it is about literally destroying something. It is an abstract representation of fear and depression and anxiety and everything connected with all of that. So with that in mind, I do like the way that it was done. I just wish there were aspects of it that were maybe had a bit more of a stylistic flair, but I can't complain about what there is there, because we spent a good 5 minutes of it praising just how it's put together. It is just this amazing thing that this character is finally getting a chance to have someone reach out to them, to what is truly them. I think that the recreations that we got of Tenko killing his family were fine. Some new animations, some reused. This probably would have hit more for me had I not rewatched these scenes rather recently. And I do like the idea that they bring up of Tomura mentioning about how he had to be a hero for them, how he had to be a hero for his friends and all those other people that we see out there in the world. And this is an idea that I wish that could be elaborated upon, but here we are at the tail end of the series and we're really not going to have it elaborated upon. None of the people that we see beyond the League of Villain members who are manifested there have visible quirks or powers. They just look like normal everyday people intentionally, because people like that exist in our society. People who are so burnt out and pained by the world that they live in, they want to tear the entire thing down and maybe start again, or just to let it rot. And that's the kind of people that Tomura inspires. They're the kind of people that see Tomura and just want him to tear the entire thing down. People who, like Tomura, need someone to bring them out of that darkness and into the light, and to help them through the pain that they're living in their lives. Again, I wish it was something that was elaborated upon, because I'm not that keen on the idea that this feels like this is the definitive statement that proves to Midoriya that not all villains are born willfully evil, that they're just evil for the sake of being evil, and that they are just evil from the start. We've seen examples of this kind of thing before in the season, to be fair, but I think that it needed to be more of a running theme, that it needed to be something that more informs Midoriya's origins and his life as a hero, more than something that just came up now and again because we happened to have him fighting a sympathetic villain who, at some point or another after the fact, he learnt the backstory of. But hey, in fairness, he spent his time around certain heroes that are just as villainous, if not more villainous than the villains, so he knows there's more to this than meets the eye. He knows that there can be a darker side to the light and a lighter side to the dark. I just wish there was more of that, but that really isn't what this series is about. It's not about recontextualizing the nature of being a hero or being a villain. It's about how you don't need superpowers to be a hero, that you can be a great hero just by reaching out to people who desperately need in the time of need. That's what this is about. I would have liked it a lot more had this thing that we see of Tomura and Midoriya in the thought space realm been the way how all this ultimately ends, and this isn't going to ultimately end in a big shonen anime fight sequence, but that's the nature of the beast, that's the nature of the series that we see here. I get it, I understand it, I'm not a big fan of it, and I do, again, wish this whole thing of not all people are evil, not all villains are born evil, anything like that, had been more of a running theme throughout all of it, but at the very least you can say that this is not the definitive statement on it, and this is not the moment that he learns it, but maybe the moment that it rounds off the idea for him. Because now he also has the memories of all the other villains, well, not literally their villains, he gets Tomura's point of view, so he knows about how things came to be the way that they are, and that's perfectly in line with everything that we see here. Of course, the big shonen anime thing is All For One making his big power play. Alright, it's not literally him, it's one of the vestiges of him, because All For One's dead, but I will admit, it's happening maybe a little bit sooner than I would have liked. And the way that it all transpires was, I do like the idea that he has this hand mask thing over his mouth, so the echoes of Tomura aren't constantly screaming, and it just ends up creating this almost dark, twisted parody of Tomura, which is horrifying. I do have to say is that, I think it all happened a little bit too soon for my liking. But I think that's just the way that this whole thing is just constructed more than anything else. And I did like the nightmare version of All For One that we see, where he's just made up of the bits of the houses and the buildings and what have you all around him, try and recreate the thumbhead version of him. I wish that we saw more of him and that was something more of. I understand why that's not like his ultimate form, because that exists in an abstract realm, but still, I would have liked to see a little bit more of it. I understand why we didn't, and this all sets up for the big darkness thing of, oh, Midoriya has given away all his powers and his abilities, and now he's had his farewell to arms. Well, I mean, all before we end up getting the meaning of the title. Like, this is the moment, this is the subversion thing of, this is the moment in the story where it should be the thing that saves the day, this should be the thing that turns things around, but isn't, and everything just keeps going wrong from there. I do wish that this maybe had been the way that the episode ended and we got into all the stuff at Aizawa in the next episode, but nonetheless, I do get what we get here, and I like what we end up getting in the second half of the episode. I do wish it could have been done better. I do think this is another case of maybe these two things should have been their own separate episodes, but I don't think at this point it would have been prudent to extend this out more than it needed to be. Like, I like the idea of it. I like the idea of all Midoriya's friends and all the people that he's inspired and all the people that he's helped coming forward to help save the day. This is Midoriya's one for all. He doesn't have an army of quirks, he has an army of friends. An army of quirk users that are here to save the day alongside him. Everyone is here paying it back to him for being a friend and being an inspiration. I like it. Whilst it is an element of friendship saving the day here, I think that given what this series is going for and what the aim of it is, it works. Again, this is a series where the core concept is you don't need superpowers to be a hero. You just need to be an inspiring figure. You need to be a figure that helps people. You need to be a figure that reaches out to people in their most darkest time of need. And this is something that we see of Midoriya throughout this series, of him trying to reach out to people, not as superpowered super beings or superpowered super beings in the making. That's the thing that has saved more people in his story, more so than just him thumping people over the head really, really hard. I do wish that we'd got better closure on the stuff with Aizawa, Present Mike, and I think the names are Boro, especially bearing in mind that I'm reading that part in Vigilantes, and that whole aspect of it, whilst it does give hints of what's really going on there, and how this is all coming together, I think that it just passed a little bit too quickly. Like, even without reading Vigilantes, this moment is almost like the culmination of the storyline with Iwasawa and Present Mike and their lost friend. And the fact it ultimately just kind of resolves itself rather quickly is something I'm not too keen on. I think there's something here that we could have lent into, but I think that the only way they could have built this out is if they lent far more into and reached more into stuff that was happening in Vigilantes, and I think at this point Vigilantes hadn't finished yet, and if it had done, I don't think they would have been willing to reach into that just so prematurely. But nonetheless, I think that more could have been done there. I think that a lot more could have been done, really. Whatever. I think that we're getting into too much in the how I would have done it territory, and I also wish that we'd actually see more of the fight at the stadium with Sarah and the others, especially given how gnarly that villain's powers looked. Like I mentioned last week, or the other week, about the Nightmare on Elm Street 4. Like, it had that kind of visual thing of all these weird malformed shapes and people and fetuses almost reaching out and dragging people down. Like, that's such a nightmarish thing that I wish we'd have seen more of it, but I guess we're not. Maybe it's a little bit more of a thing in the manga, but it certainly isn't in the anime. But we end up having everyone showing up now. Everybody, even characters that have never been a character before in this series, are showing up. And we get the moment with Eri off-screen breaking off her own horn, possibly permanently damaging her quirk, so that she can help Midoriya, which is a sweet thing. It's a very adorable little moment, and it does undermine the whole thing of Midoriya losing his arms, because now he gets them back. He doesn't have his powers, but I'm sure that there's going to be other contributions to this fight they can put together. And I suppose that maybe from a certain point of view, this is their way in saying that that Eri isn't going to be like this series' Dragon Balls, that she isn't just going to be able to heal everyone and everyone, that if anyone else dies here, they're dead. Like, she's not going to be able to bring them back. Certainly not in the immediate future in any case. So it's adding a little bit more drama into things here, and it's allowing her to use her power without putting herself in harm's way. I like the second act of this episode. I know I'm not talking that much about it, but it is a lot of setup for the next episode or so. This is setting up for the big final fight with everyone throwing their lot in to try and deal with this character once and for all. To try and deal with one for all, one for all for one, once and for all. That's the one. One for all for one, once and for all. There we go. That's what they're trying to do. I like that. I want to see how they go with it. I think that we're going to see a lot of fodder characters getting killed off. I don't think we're going to have any major revelations or anything happening at this point, but, well, not... let me rephrase revelations. I don't think we're suddenly going to see certain characters getting killed off. There's a couple that I think might, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. But in any case, let's get into the negatives, and I suppose, given the fact I've not talked that much about the Iwasawa half of the episode, I suppose that, well, I think that that's maybe a sign that I think that part of the episode just went too fast. Like, I understand that from a in-universe point of view, they really can't just keep this thing going much longer than they can do. They don't know when this teleport power thing's going to run out, or not going to work at all, or it's going to throw them into God only knows where. So I understand it being rushed. I understand them going through it all, and I really don't think we needed scene after scene, or at least extended scenes of people going, I don't know, guys, maybe I should help, maybe I shouldn't do. No, you were a great hero once, you gotta step up and save the day one this time. Well, I don't know about it. And words to that effect, just trying to convince certain people to get involved with it, or people giving big monologues about, oh, that Midoriya, he really helped me back in the day, now I'm paying it back. Like, we can imply all that. I just think that more of that stuff needed to be elaborated upon, or at the very least the stuff with Iwasawa, Present Mike and Oboro should have been built out a lot more. But again, I don't know how you do that without just repeating material that we've already seen before, or reaching into stuff from Vigilantes, which I don't know at this point in production whether or not that stuff had been dealt with. I don't mean production as far as the anime is concerned, I mean as far as the manga is concerned, and I don't think they would have reached into Vigilantes because that takes away something from a major point in that story, but at least something else could have been done there to at least build that out a little bit more. But then you don't have the big ending thing of everyone just showing up to save the day like Avengers Endgame or something like that. I do think that it makes for a good ending to the episode. I think that the idea that Midoriya is just in a field on his own without arms would have made for a greater cliffhanger, but Again, I don't know what else you could have done to extend stuff out. What we got is still good, but I think there's just certain aspects of the pacing didn't quite work for me. But with that said, let us get into the overview and say that I think this is a fantastic episode. I do think the first half is stronger than the second half. I do like the second half of the episode. I do enjoy a lot of it. I just think it passed a little bit too quickly for my liking. As such, a lot of the emotional beats just kind of slipped through the fingers. But still, with all that said and done, however, good episode, solid episode. We are getting towards the end of all of this. With all that said and done, let's get into Comment Corner. It's time for Comment Corner. We kick off with Big X1, and this is comments coming from the previous video, Wrench Open Izuka Midoriya. Big X1 says, I like what we see so far. I like what we see so far. What they are starting with Nana being the one vestige not to pass over. I think it's the kind of miserable that you like. Thank you very much. I do wish they'd leaned into a little bit more, or at least made stuff with her last a little bit longer than it should have done. But hey ho, I can't complain of what we got. I think it still works. Then we have Scott TV Gamer back again, who says the villain Cabrio, I'm pretty sure, is an attempt by Shigaraki's mind to fighting back against Deku, using his own memories to fight. They even repeat lines that said to Shigaraki in the past. Next episode, we'll be covering my favourite chapter. Previous one was in episode 4. It may be a bit controversial for some people. I'm also not a fan of the title they chose, but we'll see if somehow they made it work. And thank you for the comment. And, well, I will admit that I think that the title does give away the twist to the episode. Like, it's literally just saying to them, oh, by the way, Aizawa's going to show up and do something. That's ultimately what the title does. I think they could have gone with something better. Even if they made something up, they could have done it. But nonetheless, I can't complain that much because I still think the episode itself is solid and good. With all that said and done, however, let me know what you thought about this. Comment down in the comment section down below. Thank you all for listening, thank you all for watching, and see you next time. Goodbye!
Thanks for watching. Be sure to like, favourite, subscribe, click the bell, and do all the YouTubey stuff that YouTube wants you to do. Go on, it'll do me a power of good. Until next time, my friends, goodbye!